Moments with Mark chapter 12, starting with verse 1. Then Jesus began teaching them with stories. And Jesus often taught using stories and parables. A man planted a vineyard. He built a wall around it, dug a pit for pressing out the grape juice, and built a lookout tower. Then he leased the vineyard to tenant farmers and moved to another country. At the time of the grape harvest, he sent one of his servants to collect a share of the crop. But the farmers grabbed the servant, beat him up, and sent him back empty-handed. So now we're starting to get the full import of the story that Jesus is telling. The vineyard is the people of Israel. The man, the owner, is God. He sends a servant, which is the prophets of the Old Testament, much like John the Baptist. But they don't listen to the prophets. They don't repent. They don't turn to God. The owner then sent another servant, but they insulted him and beat him over the head. The next servant he sent was killed. Others he sent were either beaten or killed, until there was only one left, his son. And of course, his son is in reference to Jesus. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. So he sent his Son. How will they respond to his Son? He sent his Son, whom he loved dearly, and the owner finally sent him, thinking, surely they will respect my Son. God is always hopeful on the human race. Here he sent his prophets, but they killed them or beat them. So finally he sends his only Son, whom he dearly loved, and he is hopeful that they will respond and respect his only Son. Also notice how patient God is. He sends the prophet, another prophet, another prophet, until finally he sends his own Son. God is often patient with us, and thank God for that, right? That he is patient and merciful and gracious to us. But the tenant farmers said to one another, here comes the heir to his estate. Let's kill him and get the estate for ourselves. So they grabbed him and murdered him and threw his body out of the vineyard. Throughout the Gospel of Mark, we have seen the religious leaders plotting to get Jesus, to kill Jesus. And Jesus knew that his death was near now. It would only be a few days after he told this story that he would be crucified on a cross. And so we have here Jesus talking about his death in a parable, in a story. So they grabbed him and murdered him and threw his body out of the vineyard. Verse 9. What do you suppose the owner of the vineyard will do? Jesus asked. I'll tell you, he will come and kill those farmers and lease the vineyard to others. Who's the others? Well, the non-Jew, the Gentile. Didn't you ever read in the scriptures, the stone that the builders rejected has now become the cornerstone? This is the Lord's doing, and it is wonderful to see. You see, God will have vengeance and justice. We are to leave vengeance with the Lord. And it seems here in this passage that Jesus knows one thing, that he is God's Son, and that God had sent him for a task, and that he would face his inevitable death, and yet there would be triumph, resurrection from the dead, and Jesus would triumph. And it says here in verse 11, this is the Lord's doing. It is wonderful to see. Jesus knew not only that he was God's Son, but that he would triumph. The religious leaders wanted to arrest Jesus because they realized he was telling this story against them. They were the wicked farmers, but they were afraid of the crowd. So they left Jesus and went away. So religious leaders were being held responsible. The gospel comes to us in many forms, in many ways. How are we going to respond? We will be held responsible. We will be held accountable in our reactions to the gracious mercy that Christ often shows us. May you receive that grace and that mercy that Christ shows us